Hello, I'm Keane McGee with Nichols Garden Nursery in Albany, Oregon. That's in the Willamette Valley. And I'm demonstrating today how to make sauerkraut. Sauerkraut is a traditional food of Northern Europe. It's been made for millennia. It is basically cabbage and salt fermented. And in Nichols Garden Nursery, we're interested in fermenting everything from beer to cabbage. The recipe is from the book Joy of Pickling by Linda Ziedrich, and it has basically two parts. It's take salt, which is I use 4 or 5 pounds of cabbage. I use 3 tablespoons of salt. This cabbage weighs 15 pounds, and I plan to use half of it. That means I need 4.5 tablespoons of salt, and I have measured that out. The cabbage is a variety that we grow called megaton. It can get bigger than this. It's not uncommon for cabbage in the fall to be widely available and large, and it's usually used for sauerkraut, although the flavor of these large cabbages is quite nice. I don't think too many people want to put 15 pounds of cabbage in the refrigerator for a coleslaw, though. The container here is a gallon pickle jar, and it's just the right size for our family for several weeks. And I'm flavoring this with juniper berries, which is a traditional flavoring. Are you ready? Cutting a cabbage is sort of the opening of this. I should take off the outer leaves here. They have a little bit of shop worn and aren't the prettiest. The leaves, if they're in good shape, will be used again in the fermenting container at the top. The size of the slices in sauerkraut is sort of immaterial. You can use wide slices or small slices, even whole leaves, but it's more convenient to have it in nice slices. Okay. It's good to have a good sharp knife, and when cabbage sort of breaks apart, it gets that nice crunch. That's a sign that the cabbage is fresh. Okay. The easiest way to do it is to break it into maneuverable sizes. And when you have it in quarters, commonly, surprisingly, the core on these large cabbages is relatively small, and you could sauerkraut the core. The part around the outside of the core is a little coarse, and I generally don't put it in the sauerkraut. Ready to shave here a little bit. Let me show you about how I would do this. Just about, I tend to look for the 1/8 of an inch thickness here, and I'm hitting the board here a little bit. What I'm going to do now, since you've seen the beginning here, is I'm going to take a break, and I'm going to let you do the waiting in a fraction of a second, and I'm going to cut up the cabbage here and put it in this container. Okay, I'm back here. I chopped up half of my cabbage, and I'm ready to begin the process of packing the jar and salting the cabbage. I should emphasize that the salt here is non-iodized pickling salt, which works a little easier for dissolving and doesn't discolor the cabbage. It doesn't have to be too well mixed in, but you want it a reasonable amount. This particular task here is actually quite nice if you have some kids of the proper age with properly washed hands. They love packing the jar. And it looks like the jar is full, doesn't it? It's not. It still has another 2 pounds of cabbage to go in it. So there's a bit of a packing problem here. it's nice to move it around and get it mixed in with the salt as you do it. Surprisingly, it begins to liquefy almost immediately. The salt is a desiccant and draws moisture out of the cabbage. I'm going to put this in here, and I didn't put any of these in, so I'm going to do that, and a few of these, mix it up, and it doesn't really matter where they are because they're going to be mixed all through it. I'm going to clean up here and take a break and come back with the rest of the cabbage packed or sliced up. Okay, I'm going to finish packing the cabbage in here. If you're doing a lot of sauerkraut, it's nice to obtain an instrument called a mandolin, which is not a musical, but is a cabbage sauerkraut slicer, and it's a board that you move back and forth. In my case, doing 5 pounds, that doesn't seem like it's quite as important an aspect. Notice it's piling up here, and I'm going to mash it down as well as I can here. If you'd notice, the bottom here is barely beginning to start filling up with fluid already. The salt brings out the liquid almost immediately. It looks full. It may end up needing even more on here. I have just a little bit of salt left. I'm just going to put it on the top. It'll all work its way down. And on the top of this, I'm going to take some of the pieces that I had earlier. I took off the outside, and I'm going to stick them right in the top here to form sort of a shield. These pieces will sauerkraut as well, but probably we won't use them. This is to provide a sort of a covering so that the shredded sauerkraut isn't ever exposed out of the liquid when it comes up to the top here. It's already got an inch of liquid in the bottom of this container. The pressing is an important item, and I have a little small lid here that I'm just going to stick in here as a pressure plate, and I'm going to stick a bottle of watered in a wine bottle, and I'm going to let this set here for the next 3 days. Okay, it's useful to have a container like this pipe plate to set our fermenting container on like this, because as the first fermentation comes through, it's going to fill up with water, and because it's bubbling, it may actually overflow. And if it does, and you lose a little liquid, you fill that back up with a brine solution with maybe half a teaspoon of salt to a cup of water, so that you always, in the fermenting process, the top of the sauerkraut is always covered with liquid. It takes about 1 week for the first fermentation, the bubbles to finish, and at that stage I think it's ready to be tasted. At room temperature, about 2 weeks more, it's what I would call done, and that's the stage when we move it into the refrigerator, and that stops the process, or slows it down a great deal. I have here a container of the last of the sauerkraut that we have left over from the previous batch, and I think that it is really good. You can see the juniper berries in there. I would stick my fingers in here and eat it, but I think probably that isn't the right thing to do right now. But I'm ready to get a sausage and sauerkraut and have a dinner. I'm Keane McGee from Nichols Garden Nursery, and like Julia Child, bon appetit.